calmly explains that being talented does not automatically make you an adult emotionally. He flashes back to when they were younger, riding together, and remembers how she used to look so longingly at other kids just being kids. He also recalls how terrified she was when facing that minotaur back in the cave, reminding himself that she is smart and kind, and that is probably why she is always trying to live up to everyone's expectations. He then puts the assistant on the spot, asking if she can really say Eda is an adult. Walking past them, he asks if any of them have ever tried to understand her actual feelings. He turns with a piercing glare, asking if they do not actually want to help their friend. This leaves the entire group totally speechless, finally realizing they might be the problem. This assistant tries to hurry the other researchers out of the dining hall, but they all freeze when they see Eda standing right there in the hallway. She just walks past them without a single word, looking completely dejected, and when Blake tries to check on her, she just keeps on walking. He can only watch her go, clearly worried about how she is handling everything. Later that night, our boy is just sitting in his room thinking it all over, when suddenly he hears a soft knock at his door. It is Eda standing there in her nightgown and asking if she can have a moment. He lets her in and immediately starts pouring her a warm drink, handing her the mug with a gentle smile as she quietly apologizes. He then drapes his own cloak over her shoulders to keep her from getting cold, telling her kindly that she needs to stay warm. She looks down, clutching the cloak and quietly thanking him for his concern. This warm drink and his simple act of kindness seem to finally get through to her. For a moment, they just sit together in the quiet room, letting the tension fade. She apologizes for dragging him into her team's drama, but he asks if they are always like this. Eda explains that when she first joined the institute, she was full of enthusiasm. But soon, everyone just started calling her a genius and letting her do all the work. She sadly confesses that it has always been this way. Her talent makes people change. To explain what she means, she starts from the very beginning in her small home village. Eda starts her story, explaining she was born to a completely average family with no magic lineage, but she was a prodigy from birth, learning to speak almost immediately, and was already reading complex magic books as a toddler. After discovering her talent, her parents were both shocked and overjoyed, realizing their daughter was an absolute genius. So they gave her the best magic education they could and she dove right in. But soon the entire village was hailing her as a once-in-a-generation prodigy, which forced her to act like a mature adult instead of the child she was. She was pushed into combat training on top of her research just like everyone else. And by age 6, she was desperately trying to keep up with the pressure. She had to constantly tell herself she was a genius to meet the expectations of all the adults. Back in the present, she is completely breaking down, unable to hold it in any longer, her hands trembling as she clutches her dress in distress. Blake gently puts it into words, telling her he knows she is afraid of monsters. Eda is stunned, asking how he could have possibly noticed. So he reminds her of when he saved her and when they fought the Minotaur. He flashes back to that moment in the cave, pointing out just how terrified she looked back then. She finally admits it, sadly saying he is very observant. Eda confesses she has always been scared of monsters and only survived the hero's party by staying in the back. She finally confesses she is so terrified of monsters she cannot possibly fight them alone, and Blake just calmly tells her he gets it because he is scared too. He explains that for him, fighting was the only way to survive until the fear just went numb, which has Eda wishing she could have been strong like that too. But our boy gently tells her she does not need to be anyone but herself. This just makes her more upset, yelling that everyone expects her to be a strong genius, and she is terrified that if she does not live up to that, she will be abandoned. Her trauma flashes back, showing the immense pressure from her village and mentors. Even her own research team looking down on her if she is not a prodigy. She is completely spiraling, begging not to be left alone and promising to be good. Right as Blake gently places a hand on her head to comfort her, he just smiles, telling her that it is okay, and promises that he will never ever abandon her. Our boy acknowledges how hard it must have been for her all this time, telling her she has suffered so much while she looks up with tears in her eyes. He asks her if it was tough, finally giving her permission to be vulnerable, and praises her for doing so well despite everything. That is the final straw, and she just lets out a gut-wrenching cry, throwing herself into his arms and finally letting it all out. She sobs that she just wants to be a normal kid who plays with friends and eats sweets. Eda admits she is scared of monsters and wishes she could rely on others more. But Blake points out that children are allowed to be vulnerable with adults, and reassures her that she does not need to be a genius or act like one, telling her she can always rely on him, which she asks if that is really okay. And he confirms it is, holding her close as she feels warmth, as Eda thanks Blake, who gently strokes her head, holding her hand as she leans into him, finding comfort in his presence. Blake smiles, remembering their past, thinking that this is just like back then, recalling a past battle where he fought against magical attacks. And then he is back in the present, finding Eda collapsed on the ground. He is in a room with 2 beds, one occupied by a sleeping Eda. Blake pulls his hood up, looking concerned, and approaches the sleeping Eda. She is fast asleep, looking exhausted. He gently takes her hand, watching over her. Eda rests her head on Blake's lap, finding solace. She cries out for Blake not to leave her alone, and he reassures her that he is right there and not going anywhere. A few days later, Blake is waiting in a bustling city market for someone. Soon enough, he hears some light footsteps approaching from behind, and it is Eda asking if she kept him waiting for long. She is wearing a simple dress and a hat, looking like a normal girl for once. Our boy just smiles, telling her she is right on time as they head into the crowd. This market is absolutely alive with people and colorful stalls, which has Etta completely mesmerized by all the activity. He asks if this is her first time out in the city and she admits it is. Blake just says that is great, which leaves her a little confused, because he explains that first experiences are always the most fun. That simple idea makes her absolutely beam with happiness. Their first stop is a candy stall where she gets to pick out a treat, and they walk through the market enjoying their lollipops together. Etta then spots a group of kids running and playing near a bakery, and after a moment's hesitation, she actually runs off to join them. Blake just watches with a warm smile, glad she is finally getting to be a kid. They spend the whole day exploring the city until the sun begins to set. Walking back together, she looks more relaxed and content than ever before, giving him a huge, heartfelt smile that shows how much the day meant to her. But back in the now darkening streets, her research team is looking for her and they do not look happy. While they are walking, Etta gets completely captivated by a stall full of sparkling jewelry, and the friendly shopkeeper is more than happy to show them her wares. Blake notices her staring and asks if she has found something she likes, which totally catches her off guard and leaves her a bit flustered. He just gives her a gentle smile, seeing right through her hesitation. And before she can stop him, he picks out a necklace to buy for her. She tries to refuse, but our boy insists, saying he wants it to be a present. After he pays, the shopkeeper playfully puts the change on Etta's hat before handing the young girl her brand new necklace. Etta is absolutely ecstatic, holding up her gift with a massive grin, just twirling with pure, unadulterated joy for a moment. This shopkeeper then comments on what a kind father and adorable daughter they make, which makes both of them freeze up in a moment of pure, hilarious awkwardness. But they quickly shake it off, sharing a laugh about the whole misunderstanding. They spend the rest of the day together, walking through the festival streets as the sun sets. 1 week later, they are back at the institute, standing before the entire research team. Etta starts by apologizing, admitting she failed to find a counter for the miasma. But she announces a new direction for their research, focusing on barrier mages instead. She then turns to Blake and formally asks for his cooperation again, and he immediately agrees. Suddenly, the entire team steps forward, with Lim at the front calling out to them. This entire research team suddenly bows, sincerely apologizing for their behavior, admitting they got lazy and dumped all their responsibilities on Etta just because she is a genius, and even confesses they disrespected Blake out of jealousy to protect their own pride. With another deep bow, they offer a heartfelt apology to both of them. Blake just smiles it off, saying it is all right, and Etta quickly agrees with him. She does tell them, however, that they need to start pulling their own weight from now on, which they gratefully accept. This team then turns to Blake, apologizing again and admitting they finally understand how incredible barrier magic is. Etta asks what changed their minds, and Lim gives all the credit to our boy. She explains they knew Etta was suffering because of them but were too cowardly to face their own helplessness. Apparently, Blake gave them a much-needed reality check and helped Etta smile again, which gave them courage. Lim finishes by saying that both Blake and his barrier techniques are truly wonderful. Etta just beams, agreeing with her from the bottom of her heart. Sometime later, the whole group stands outside the institute to see Blake off. He tells Etta he will keep her updated on his progress and she promises to wait for him. But just as he is about to leave, she gets his attention for a moment and whispers in his ear, asking if he will take her out to have fun again sometime. Our boy just gives her the warmest smile, telling her he'd be happy to any time. This little private exchange leaves the other researchers completely baffled in the background. With that, Blake waves goodbye as the entire team enthusiastically sees him off. As he walks away, he thinks about how long it has been since he has been back home, wondering how everyone is doing. Blake finally returns home, only to get an earful from his 3 worried party members. He nervously tries to explain where he has been, and after telling them about his mission, they are all in disbelief about him capturing monsters. This red-haired guy is stunned, thinking about how exclusive the Magic Research Institute is, while the black-haired girl cannot believe he got close to 2 members of the hero's party, and the silver-haired girl is left wondering if barrier magic is really that amazing. Their collective shock has them wondering just who on earth this guy really is. Blake then asks how their training has been, and the red-haired guy looks absolutely thrilled. He proudly announces that tomorrow he will show off the results of his training, and the next day at the training grounds, the trio is unleashing some flashy elemental magic. They combine their powers into a massive blast of energy, which Blake watches from the sidelines with a calm, observant expression. But the red-haired kid is frustrated with the result, feeling like he is not getting stronger fast enough, just in time for some classic bullies to show up and mock them for being dropouts. This red-haired kid is absolutely fuming at their taunts, but the girls just look defeated, accepting that they are always in last place. This just makes him angrier, yelling at them for giving up and wanting to rely on the old man again, which has the black-haired girl flustered, trying to deny that is what she meant. He has had enough though, turning away and declaring that he will not give up, punctuating his resolve by stomping the ground with fierce determination. As the girls try to calm him down, the black-haired one, Therese, seems especially concerned. But Blake just watches the whole dramatic scene unfold with a deadpan expression, looking completely lost as to what is even happening with his students. Suddenly, the red-haired kid drops to the floor in a full-on bow right in front of him, desperately begging Blake to teach him magic so he can get stronger and avoid being fired. Blake kneels down, asking him why he is taking things to such an extreme. So the kid explains he is the eldest son of a rural noble family and their only mage, and since they are poor, he needs to succeed to make life easier for everyone back home. Our boy says he understands but reminds him that he only knows barrier techniques, which makes the kid's face fall for a second before he seems to get an idea. Blake then offers to teach him combat techniques instead, which he immediately accepts. And with training set for tomorrow, the kid bows again, thanking him profusely. This next day, however, he is shocked to find the two girls waiting there as well, with Therese declaring they will not let him get ahead by hogging the old man all to himself. Blake just smiles, explaining that he invited them since they clearly felt the same way, which has the red-haired kid complaining about all the begging he did for nothing. Meanwhile, the silver-haired girl decides she will observe Blake carefully to uncover his secrets. Getting a little too close as she tries to analyze him with an intense stare, he just turns to her with a gentle, all-knowing smile before patting her on the head, completely shattering her serious mood. Blake starts telling his story, explaining how he was taken to the demon realm as a child, and it was a pretty bleak and desolate place to be sent, where he and other kids were tasked with creating barriers to suppress the miasma and monsters. They were given almost no food or pay before being completely abandoned to their fate. He was left all alone in a hostile land with just a small bag of supplies, and his mission required him to constantly maintain a massive barrier, trapping him in one spot. This kid barely got any sleep, pouring all his energy into the barrier as his food ran out, pushing him to his absolute physical and mental limits. That is when he came up with an idea to create a magic circle that would maintain the barrier automatically, which has the trio freaking out since developing new magic circles is considered basically impossible. Blake just casually tells them he pulled it off, which completely blows the red-haired kid's mind. In just a few days, young Blake had developed a brand new, self-sustaining magic circle, leaving him completely drained but successful. And after activating it, he finally got to sleep properly for the first time in ages. A few days later, he paid a passing merchant to share his new technique with the other abandoned barrier mages. But with that problem solved, he now had to figure out how to get food and shelter. His first attempt at foraging ended with him running for his life from a massive monster. So for a while, he survived on the meager rations that were delivered every few months. Eventually, however, even those supply drops stopped coming completely. With no other options left, he was forced to venture back into that monster-infested forest. So young Blake was forced to forage in a forest crawling with monsters, which meant constantly running for his life from some seriously nasty creatures, and his only option was to throw up a desperate barrier to stay alive, which thankfully was just strong enough to block their attacks, but it left him completely drained every single time. And all that risk was for a pathetic handful of mushrooms and plants. Plus, the dense miasma meant he had to constantly purify himself just to breathe. So he decided that just defending was not enough, he needed to get stronger, throwing himself into researching new ways to use his barrier techniques, and after some intense training, he managed to strengthen them significantly, letting him trap monsters for short periods to gather resources safely. Which is how he survived for the next 3 years now at age 12, where he'd encounter even bigger threats like giant snakes, but his refined techniques could now easily trap them in a box, restraining them for several minutes while he went about his business, allowing him to finally gather a decent amount of food without any trouble. And while his magic power was growing, he still had no way to actually defeat monsters, since his barriers were completely stationary and could not be used for attacks. So after years of effort, he finally figured out how to move them, and by age 15, he could freely control his barriers at will. He calls this his offensive barrier technique, finally turning his defense into a weapon. And with that, he finally got to eat some real meat for the first time in ages, which tasted incredible after he purified all the miasma out of it, of course. This breakthrough pushed him to research his barrier magic even further, experimenting with shape and hardness until he could use them for high-speed movement, eventually mastering properties like softness and viscosity to create whatever he needed. Back in the present, he tells the trio this is how he developed his combat style, explaining that after fighting monsters every single day just to survive, he could now casually block a massive fire blast with a single hand. His students can only watch with their jaws on the floor, completely speechless. Blake then launches himself into the air, preparing a counterattack, gathering a ridiculous amount of energy into the palm of his hand, before unleashing a concentrated barrier strike that tears right through the monster, and he lands without a scratch, casually telling them this is what he is capable of. This trio is losing their minds, realizing he just one-shotted a salamander like it was nothing. Our boy just turns to them with a completely deadpan "oh really?" as if it is no big deal, and they finally understand that his insane background is the reason he is so op. Blake just gives them a slightly confused smile, not getting their reaction at all, then cheerfully suggests they can reach his level if they just do the same thing, which has the girls thinking he is a completely insensitive and oblivious old man. This red-haired kid gets all fired up, declaring they have no choice but to get as strong as Blake, who just smiles, thinking their timing is perfect, before pointing out a two-headed monster as their next training opponent. This trio collectively loses their minds, absolutely terrified by the suggestion, and they immediately nope out of there, screaming as they run for their lives. This scene then shifts to a different red-haired guy, a captain, walking down a fancy hall with his squad. A couple of old officials are showering him with praise for his incredible skill and young age, introducing him as Lord Flawless Lancelot, who looks completely unimpressed by the hype. He humbly brushes off the compliments, which only makes the old guys praise him even more. So Lancelot just walks right past them, ignoring their continued flattery. Even his own subordinates think he is amazing, though they admit the bureaucrats are laying it on thick. They tell him not to be so modest, but he just insists they are overestimating him, thinking to himself that he is not that great and just had a bit more talent than others. Lately, his magic skills have been stagnating and he does not really have any goals to strive for, which is a shame because the guy can clearly unleash some massive fire magic. With the Demon King gone, the Royal Magician Corps mostly just keeps the peace these days. And while peace is wonderful, he is feeling the constant pressure of everyone's expectations, which he is mulling over in his office when a subordinate enters with a report. Some low-level monsters are attacking nearby villages, a perfect training op for new recruits. Lancelot considers the report, wondering who he should send on the mission. This red-haired kid is having a full-blown panic attack about the upcoming mission. And the girls are trying to play it cool, telling themselves it is no big deal. While the silver-haired kid is so chill, he is offering snacks, which only makes the other guy more frantic. Turns out all the new recruits are being sent on an expedition with the 1st Division, a fact that does not faze the silver-haired kid at all since he is apparently used to fighting monsters. This trio tries to pump themselves up, remembering they have been training with Blake and should be stronger now. But some other recruits start mocking them for being nervous, calling them dropouts, which gets our red-haired boy all fired up before an officer yells for everyone to fall in line. This entire group immediately snaps to attention in perfect formation, just as Lancelot himself strides forward to address the new recruits. He lays out the mission details: a 2-week trip to hunt some low-level monsters, and the whole corps roars back, "Yes, sir," with our trio right in the mix. With the order given, the expedition officially begins, as the massive group marches out of the city gates in formation. Their journey takes them through a barren, rocky canyon, and after 6 hours of non-stop walking, our trio is already looking completely wiped out. They are not the only ones, as other recruits are struggling with the steep terrain, so an officer finally calls for a much-needed 30-minute break. Everyone immediately collapses in exhaustion, glad for the chance to rest. But another officer suddenly appears, yelling at them for stopping. Turns out the break is not for them. The officer orders the trainees to tend to the senior squad members, which means our red-haired kid is immediately put on massage duty for some smug-looking senior. This hazing goes on all day, and even into the night, with Lancelot on watch while the other recruits are completely passed out. 7 days later, the trio looks absolutely destroyed, running on pure fumes and desperation. This red-haired kid is having a full-on mental breakdown, convinced he is going to die from exhaustion, while the dark-haired girl is right at her breaking point, and the silver-haired girl is just trying her best not to fall asleep standing up. Blake, on the other hand, is perfectly fine, cheerfully offering them water like it is a vacation. He just casually explains this is nothing compared to his past, flashing back to his monster-slaying days. This kids can only accept that their teacher is just built on a completely different level. That is when the red-haired kid realizes the other trainees are gone, and Blake confirms they all deserted. A couple of seniors then stroll up, sarcastically congratulating them for lasting longer than the others. Their attention quickly shifts to Blake, sneering about him being the old guy who got in on a recommendation. They start openly mocking his age and specialty, wondering how a simple barrier mage got into the Corps. But the trio immediately leaps to his defense, shouting that Blake is way stronger than they could imagine. This just ticks off the seniors, who decide these brats need to be taught some respect. Just as things are about to escalate, Captain Lancelot appears, demanding to know what is going on. This bullies instantly freeze up, stammering that it is nothing before making a hasty retreat. Lancelot gives the group a stern warning not to cause trouble, and Blake just thanks him for stepping in. Lancelot sizes up the old man, wondering if Blake is secretly hiding his true strength, and after a brutal 14-day march, the expedition finally arrives at a damaged village. This village chief explains that monsters have been attacking and they are terrified they will be next. So he begs Lancelot to defeat the creatures, claiming he knows where they are hiding. But the captain is not buying it for a second, sensing something is seriously wrong here. While he is thinking our trio of recruits is completely wiped out from the journey, Blake, however, strolls back and looking like he just got back from a spa day. An officer then calls all the squad leaders together for a strategy meeting, which is when it hits Lancelot the village chief is definitely lying. He explains that he saw burned houses but no young women, deducing they have been taken hostage. His subordinates are, of course, completely amazed by his brilliant insight. Lancelot then lays out the plan: they will ambush the monsters when they inevitably attack at night. This squad leaders immediately agree, since they'd never question their flawless captain's judgment. Lancelot seems to accept their confidence, but he is still mulling over the plan as he looks over his team, ready to give the final command. Just then, Blake raises his hand, asking if he can say something. This other leaders immediately jump on him, telling the rookie to shut up and know his place. Lancelot quickly steps in, telling his men that is enough. He says it does not matter if Blake is new, he wants to hear his honest opinion. Blake then explains that their current plan will not save the hostages, suggesting a more offensive approach is needed. Lancelot points out they do not know the enemy's location, and Blake confirms they will not be searching before nightfall. which has the other squad leaders protesting that a search is impossible in such a short time. But Blake just smiles, saying they can easily find them using his detection barrier technique.
Please subscribe for more.